Hold on, Booktube. We are in the midst of immense battle, as we are in the midst of the Hall Wars, and shots could be fired at any moment. There is no safety to be had, and so I thought I would come along and play the diplomat and try to bring peace to all of Booktube by having the book hall to end all book halls. So that's what I have today. Another stack of nonfiction books, fiction books, and classics. And one of the wonderful trends of my latest book hauls is that fiction has gotten a revigorated life in my recent book hauls because I've been mining the depths of the best of lists of fiction for each year since 1990 on a world famous book reviewer uh, world famous book reviewers lists, and so that has helped me separate what is fiction worth buying and fiction that is worth staying on the shelves at a thrift store. So we're going to start with nonfiction, and then we'll move on to fiction, and then we'll end off with classics. And I hope to include this all in one video, because if I do multiple videos, that will be just more provocation in the Hall Wars, and we wouldn't want that, now would we? Uh, so the nonfiction stack. We'll start off with a Pelican book. This is Before Philosophy, and well, I'll read you the little blurb on here. It says, a study of primitive myths, beliefs, and speculations of Egypt and Mesopotamia, out of which grew the religions and philosophies of the later world. So it's a book studying Egypt and Mesopotamia in particular, and how their religious ideas evolved into matters of philosophy. And it's got a whole roster of authors there because this is really a collection of essays. And it was originally published in Chicago University Press in the 40s under the title The Intellectual Adventures of Ancient Man. And yeah, it's got an introduction, an essay on Egypt, an essay on Mesopotamia, and then a conclusion. And they're all by different authors. And it's just an old little Pelican book. I thought that was a really interesting premise. So I'll have that as the first offering in the piece towards all book hauls, and we'll see how this goes. The next book is another history book. This is The Scientific Renaissance from 1450 to 1630. This is by Marie Boas Hall, and it's a study of the scientific revolution during that time period. And I've never heard of this book, but it's published by Dover when Dover was actually taking publishing chances like this, where they would publish works of scholarship. Now they're just a popular cheap reprint house of public domain classics, but this is a scholarly work from 1966. Yeah, 1966. So I've never heard of this book or the author, but the scientific revolution or the scientific renaissance is definitely in my area of interest, so I picked it up. Then we move on into some Canadian history. Canadian history is usually something I want to stay away from because it's extremely dull. It has nothing like the American history has to lend itself. Nothing like the like a revolution or any kind of or civil war or straddling on the world stage as a world power, that kind of thing. Instead, it's just like the fur trade and lots and lots of prairie land. But the first book I got is apparently is a classic because this edition is on its third edition, and it says more than 25,000 copies in print, which is fairly good for a work of history. This is called First Peoples in Canada. It's about just a book about Indigenous history, which I find interesting because it's very much entrenched in Canadian, like it's very much part of Canada's history of nations' relations with Indigenous people, and this is a history book on that subject, but what's important for me at least is that this is an older book on Indigenous history. It's by Alan D. McMillan and Eldon Yellowhorn, and it was published in 2004, and that's important because books today on Indigenous history are usually less interested in history and more interested in redressing wrongs or redressing past injustices. And so it's more a lecture on um, how much better the Indigenous history is than any kind of Western history is. And it basically revolves down into your grandparents are horrible people. And I hope this book doesn't do that. It's an much older book than the recent trends that try to do that. So, and Indigenous history, of course, is a very interesting subject, even though we don't have as much, say, written documents as you would for European history. But I'll see what I can make with this book. And then we continue with our Canadian history. This is the Canadian Prairies. This is by Gerald Friesen, and it's a history of the Canadian prairies. If you're not familiar with Canada, we have 3 provinces, mostly 2, including the one I live in, that are the southern part is mostly prairie land. So it's southern Manitoba, southern Saskatchewan, and part of Alberta. And I grew up in the prairies. I wasn't born in the prairies, but I grew up in the prairies, and I've always found them quite boring. It's very flat. It takes me literally 2 turns in about an hour and a half to get to the nearest major city, and from my current location, and it's just a lot of farmland and kind of boring. I always envy people who can drive through mountains and Rockies and rocky terrain and forests and whatnot, and have hiking paths nearby. Instead, I just got the prairies. But in some way, you can appreciate them because they've got their own charm to them. Though I've largely not been attuned to them, so I don't know what to make of this book. It's a fairly thick book too. And it's by a scholarly press. Yeah, University of Toronto Press. So we'll see how this book is, and whether or not I learn some valuable stuff about the Canadian prairies. Then we change tunes quite drastically. We go to a book called Frozen Desire, and it's about money. So the subtitle is The Meaning of Money by James Buchanan. And I've never heard of this book before, but it's reading the description in the thrift store. It sounded very much like a wrestling with the idea of money and what money is, and how can we understand it. And he makes a fairly bold claim too, saying he thinks money is humans' greatest invention. I think that's what at least the dust jacket says. Yeah, he says money is civilization's greatest invention. And yeah, very, very odd claim there. But of course, money is this really weird thing, and it always reminds me, or at least now it reminds me, of even reading the section from Aristotle's Ethics, which is unusual because usually you'd think he'd talk about money in his politics, but he talks more about money in his ethics and about the value of money and how money is supposed to be some like a transferring of equivalent value over something. So if you want to buy a house, you'd have to say that's equivalent to say 100 pairs of shoes or something. But you can't really actually make 100 pairs of shoes and use that to buy a house. So you have to have the equivalent in a commonly accepted coinage. So maybe a pair of shoes is, I don't know, $10 in our terms, and a house is $100. You need $10 to buy. You need 10 pairs of shoes to buy a house, but you'd have to make that equivalent into money. I'm not explaining that very well, but it was a fascinating discussion in the ethics, and I hope he kind of explores that in here. So, just because I mean, at least it's common in some areas of the internet today to say like money is this social invention that where we just commonly accept it as valuable, but if we all decided that it's not valuable anymore, then it would stop having worth. And I think that's a very cynical view of money. I think it's a lot more complex than that, than just saying, or at least dumbing everything down to a social convention, because social conventions can be a lot stronger than even some of our I don't know what would we consider stronger than that, but usually it's calling something a social convention is a way of dismissing it and saying that it really has no inherent value other than what people give it. Um, but I think it goes a lot deeper than that because social conventions are very much part of our own nature. But that's enough digression on money. This is an economics book now. This is The Moral Ecology of Markets. And its subtitle is Assessing Claims About Markets and Justice, and it's by Daniel K. Finn. And it's a scholarly book. It's by Cambridge University Press. It's very thin, but it's oversized. It's not the usual paperback size. And I don't know, the subtitle and the title sound very boring, but the back actually sounded very good. It's about disagreements about the morality of markets and about self-interested behavior within markets runs deep, and it seems to be his attempt at trying to combine economics and political philosophy, where they always seem to be at odds with each other, and he's trying to kind of bring that together. Uh, that's where you have markets. So you have markets. Usually, it's very economical. It's very analytical, but then you have justice, which is a political philosophy uh, term or concept, and they always seem to be at odds with one another. And I guess he's trying to bring that together. We'll see if this book is too in the weeds and I don't really understand it. Then I can always just pass it along. This next book is an odd subject. It's American history, but it's not the kind of American history that you would think. It's the sexual revolution in early America, and it's by Richard Godbeer, and it's another scholarly press book, and it's a look at the Puritan times of early America, and yeah, like 1695, 1766, about the colonies of British North America and early America and what their sexual ethics were at the time. Because the point of this book is to dispel the normal view of the Puritans as like these stuffy, uptight people. It seems like he's trying to give a more nuanced claim to that time period than what the common perception is, and I'm all for it. It would be interesting to see. Usually, a book like this would just show the exceptions and consider that as just proof that the common perception is false. But usually, the common perceptions are true based off of what the general theme of the time period was. Just because there's some wild exceptions that we don't usually account for, doesn't mean that the standard idea is false. It just means that that was the norm of the times, and then there's some exceptions to the rule, because there's always exceptions to the rule. But we'll see if it goes deeper than that in this book. And then we have the similar illustration on the back. Very striking cover indeed. And then we come to some military history, or at least World War II history. And the first book is The Dictators by Richard Overy, and its subtitle is Hitler's Germany and Stalin's Russia. And it's just a big book studying dictatorship through these two monstrous figures of the 20th century. Grim reading for a massive book, and a book with a lot of... Here, I'll read the dust jacket. It says, Richard Overy sets out to answer answer the questions. How was dictatorship possible? How did it function? What was the bond that tied dictator and people so powerfully together? And then Uh, Overy paints a remarkable and vivid account of the different ways in which Stalin and Hitler rose to power and abused and dominated their people, which I'd say should give you chills reading that in today's world. And uh, I picked this up because I've read a book by this author before. I had to read, I think, his book, Russia's War or something. It's a slim book on Russia's role, or focusing on Russia's role in World War II. And it was a fascinating book. It's presented a part of World War II that I had not read up before. I mean, I'm not well versed on World War II to begin with, but reading in schools you usually get the Western Front, but you never get the Eastern Front all that much. And so getting that the Russia versus Germany part in detail was very interesting. And this author seems to be a reliable author on the subject of World War II history. So getting a big fat book on the dictators, which seems to be more of a study of dictatorship than a dual biography, which is what I hope it is. If it's a dual biography, I don't think I really care so much about them as people so much as how they were compelling to their nations. And then the next book also hits on World War II. This is the Guns at Last Light. This is by Rick Atkinson, and the subtitle is The War in Western Europe, 1944 to 1945, and it's Volume 3 in the Liberation Trilogy. And I picked this up because Steve Donahue, in his latest Battle Hall, had a book by this author, and he mentioned this trilogy and said that it was really good. And so I found the third volume, and it was very cheap. I decided to pick it up. And thanks, Steve, for influencing this latest confrontation in the Hall Wars. And hopefully the last confrontation in the Hall Wars. And some very appropriately themed World War II books. I don't know if I have not seen the other two volumes, but I'll see if I'll pick those up if I find them cheap and in good condition. Because I don't have a whole lot of World War II books, mostly because the theme just seems so massive that I don't really care to begin. Because it just seems like I'm only interested in reading more overviews of the war than getting into specific details about battles and whatever. Because military history and very specific history like that very much doesn't interest me. So get it. So having more overviews of battles and overviews of the war and like these battles in context of the war, that is more interesting to me. Then we move on. We go to a book called Civilizations. This is by Felipe Fernandez Armisto, and its subtitle is Culture, Ambition, and the Transformation of Nature. And I'm really not entirely sure what this is about, other than that the author has come strongly recommended at one point. Mostly for his book Millennium, it says the author of Millennium on here, which I hope to find someday. But this book will do just as well, and it just seems to be a personal account. It says large-minded and comprehensive work, redefining the subject of civilization. And it says, to Fernandez Armistido, a civilization is, quote-unquote, civilized in direct proportion to its distance, its difference from the unmodified natural environment, by, close quote, by its taming and warping of climate, geography, and ecology. So, I don't know. Seems kind of out there, but I don't know. We'll see. I'll give it a chance. Give this author a chance. And the last book for my nonfiction section probably was defined. Actually, I'll say it. Go out of my way and say it was defined of the nonfiction side. So this was defined for nonfiction. It's The Cultures of the West: A History, Volume 2, since 1350, and it's by Clifford R. Beckman. Sorry, Clifford Clifford R. Bachman. And the reason why I'd say this is a find, because it's a oversized textbook published by Oxford, uh, a volume 2 in a 2-volume work. Well, it's because I have volume 1, and the cultures of the West is probably one of these subjects that interests me the most, is like a cultural history. And so having volume 2 that goes with my volume 1, which I also found used, probably, 6 months ago, found that one used. And I was very close to buying the volume 2 on eBay, used, just to get a companion volume, but I didn't want to pay, what was it, $20 or something, just to have a volume 2. So I figured I would wait, and maybe, and if I got around to reading volume 1 and I still hadn't found volume 2, then I'll buy volume 2 on eBay used. But I didn't need to. I found volume 2 for perfectly cheap, and it's in perfect condition, and it's full of color photographs too. So it's one of those textbooks that is very, very well made. Lots of color illustrations. What was that? Was that a map? Yes, it was. Yeah, so it's full of color illustrations. It's very floppy. There's no obnoxious highlighting. It's basically brand new. And I can guarantee you, if I bought this brand new, it probably would have cost me like $80 or something. Something ridiculous like that. But finding it used, and I think I got it for probably $6, that was a steal. Then we move, at the 21-minute mark, we move to the fiction side. And the fiction side is going to be dominated by the same theme that I mentioned before, the lists of the infamous or world famous, or however you want to describe him, the world famous book reviewer. Not all of these are from that list, but some, a good chunk of them are, and I'll be pointing those out as we go along. But the first one is not. This is Muriel Sparks. This is a novel by Muriel Spark, and it's the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Yeah, the Prime of Miss Jean Brodie. Sorry, I was struggling to read that script on the front there, but yeah, it's a little slim thing, just tiny, and it's a very attractively designed, modern little thing. But it's published in the '60s. It's a little novel, by Muriel Spark. I hauled a novel by Muriel Spark, I think on my last haul, or maybe the one before that. I don't know. I have so many hauls that I just can't remember them all anymore. It's almost as if my hauls are inexhaustible. But yeah, I bought Memento Mori by the same author in that haul, and this is just another one to add to the collection. I heard that she's rather witty, so we'll see. It's a slim little thing. Although I do find it was a little bit amusing when I was looking through this book before that. We get the copyright information on one page and then chapter 1 on the other page, which I thought was only the domain of self-published authors, but not something done by Penguin. But whatever, I'm not going to argue. Next is Evelyn Waugh. This is A Handful of Dust, with a fairly ugly cover. But it's, and then the whole edition, it's one of those orange spine penguins, but the whole edition is matted. It's got that papery feel to it, which is unusual for this kind of penguin, at least from what my experience is. And this is a novel I've had my eye on ever since I've ever heard of Evelyn Waugh. I'm not entirely sure why, but I found it and I decided to pick it up. I've never actually read any Evelyn Waugh. I do have his Brideshead Revisited in a nice hardcover that I need to read, but I'll just add this to the Evelyn Waugh collection. Then this next book is the first book on that world famous book reviewer's best of lists. This was from the 90s. I'm not entirely sure. When was this book written? It says 1978, so it doesn't seem quite right. But it's The Bookshop by Penelope Fitzgerald, and it's introduced by David Nichols, and says it was shortlisted for the Booker Prize. But yeah, I believe this was on the list in the 90s. So did the world famous book reviewer get the year wrong and put it on a 90s list, or did I get the wrong book? Pretty sure I didn't get the wrong book because I looked up the list on my phone as I got this, even though the American edition has a fairly ugly cover. Maybe it's only me who would think that that other cover is ugly because it's just a picture of a bookshop and some lady standing there, and it looks very much like those cozy library mystery books that people like to snuggle up, read once, and then toss out. But this one, I hope, has a little bit more substance than that, but we'll see. And I'll have to fact check it to see whether or not I'm wrong or the list was, because I believe this was listed in the 90s, and the copyright page says 1978. So that threw me off a bit. Um, that's not doing so well for my diplomacy here. Next book is another book on the list, and I'm certain this was on that list. The copyright page, let's hope the copyright page doesn't yell back at me this time. 2018. Yeah, sounds about right. This is Kate Atkinson. This is Transcendence, or no, Transcription. Man, I can't even read. I was reading it backwards on the camera here, because it flips it backwards when I'm watching. Transcription. And this seems to be like a historical fiction book. Yeah, about World War II, or some experience during World War II that comes back to haunt the character later in their life. And yeah, it's a historical novel. I'll give it a good try. I do have the author's Life After Life book as an ebook, and I've seen it a couple times used when I go use book shopping. But usually my way to go now is if I have an ebook of the book, I'm not gonna buy a physical copy. So I'm either gonna have one or the other. It's not gonna be both, though there are some exceptions. And the next book is also from that world famous book reviewer's book list. This is the only Salman Rushdie book that was on that list. It's The Moor's Last Sigh. And I've not read any Salman Rushdie. I know he's fairly prolific because he's got a lot of novels out. I've seen a lot of them used. But the only book that I have of his is an ebook copy of his most famous book. What's it called? Midnight's Children? Yeah, I think that's what it's called, and I have an ebook copy of it, though I have not read it yet. Though I know that one is quite well beloved, and people devotedly read everything he writes. But this one made it on the best fiction list, and so it's gonna be the one that I try in a physical form. This one, and of course the ebook of Midnight's Children, I'll read, and if I like this author, then I'll continue on with him. Next is a book I don't know if I should have bought, but I bought it anyways. I indulged myself. It's a novel by James Baldwin. It's called Another Country, and it's a vintage paperback of a James Baldwin novel, but it's not one of his novels that I've ever heard of or that I think is well known in like the common parlance as like a one of the best works by this author, because I was going through the book, and it lists all of his other works, and there's a lot here. So is this maybe one of his duller novels, one of his less famous ones? Because I've heard of Go Tell It on the Mountain, Giovanni's Room, and if Beale Street Could Talk, and I think that's all I've heard of his. Other than, of course, some of his famous nonfiction, like Notes of a Native Son. But I've never heard of Another Country before, so I'll give it a try. I've been wanting to read some James Baldwin. I do believe I have Giovanni's Room, at least, if not, If Beale Street Could Talk, as ebooks. So this is the first physical edition of his novel, or of a novel of his that I have, and we'll see if I end up liking that author. More fiction, because my fiction stack it was quite large this time. We move almost exclusively into hardcovers here, with one exception. Well, I guess I'll do the softcover first, and then we'll get into the hardcovers. We have Sacred Great Games by Vikram Chandra, and this is also on that famous book reviewers list. I believe this made it #1 for that particular year, and this one was one of the exceptions to the rule. Um, this was published in 2006, and I recently bought the ebook version of this when it was on sale for like $3 or something as an ebook deal, and I bought it. But then when I saw this paperback, which I've been waiting to find this used for quite some time, so I was very happy to get the ebook. But then finding this used, like a nice paperback, um, I felt like I should pick it up anyways. And you can see it's rather hefty, and add it to my growing shelf of Indian novelists or books by Indian novelists. I have quite a few now. What do I have? Suitable Boy, White Tiger, and have a few more. But I don't know. Does someone Rushdie count? I guess he would. So then I guess you can count the Moor's Last Sigh. But yeah. Anyways, there's a big fat book by this author. It seems to be some kind of thrilling tale following many different people. It says a policeman, a criminal lord, a Bollywood film star, beggars, cultists, spies, and terrorists. The lives of the privileged, the famous, the wretched, and the bloodthirsty interweave with cataclysmic consequences amidst the chaos of modern-day Mumbai in this soaring, uncompromising, and unforgettable epic masterwork of literary art. And then we have a little picture of our author here. So that was a great find. I was very happy for that, especially since the paperback is so nice and floppy. Though I'll say this: the hardcover for this is absolutely stunning, at least in my view. It's very minimalist, but it's stunning, and I think all these kind of cartoony paperbacks with these bases on there and whatnot. And there's an adaptation of this book where it has a new cover to it, which is the cover of the ebook that I bought, and it has different pictures on there, and I just find it far less appealing than that hardcover. And then we come to David Mitchell's Cloud Atlas, which was not on the famous book reviewers list, I don't think, though his other book, The Bone Clocks or something, was, and so I have that as an ebook. But this one I don't think was. But I've heard so many other people praise it and say that this was a fantastic novel that I felt like I had to give it a try. And it's interesting because I actually found this. I went to, I think, 3 different thrift stores, and the first thrift store I had actually had the movie cover of this in paperback, and I left it behind because I didn't like the cover. I wanted this cover. I love this cover, and so going to another thrift store, I found it in a modern library hardcover with the original cover with all the little squares on there, which I quite like. And yeah, you've heard that right. This is modern library with the characteristic modern library look to it. I did not realize that they published contemporary novels at all. I just thought they were a classic reprint house, but I guess I'm wrong at that, because this edition, the book was published in 2004, but this edition is 2012. So, I mean, would that be considered a classic? Or I just assumed they were a classic reprint house. So I don't really understand why they would publish a contemporary novel like this before, but if you know the answer to that question, then feel free to, relay some information. And then we come to probably the best fiction find, I want to say. The best fiction find, but it comes with a condition. So the book is Musashi by Yoshikawa, and it's a big fat, like 1,000-page book, which doesn't look as big in this hardcover edition. But it's like a historical novel or historical Japanese novel, kind of in the vein of Shogun by James Clerval. But the condition is that it didn't come with a dust jacket. I just found it in this naked hardcover. which I'm fine with. I'm fine with the naked hardcover, but I know some people wouldn't. They need that paper the dust jacket on there to give it some life, I guess, because the naked hardcover really isn't all that appealing. But I consider it one of the best finds because I've been really wanting to read this novel for a while now. It was written in Japanese in the 70s, yeah, 1971, and this translation was done in the 80s or published in 1981. It was translated by Charles S. Terry, and this is the whole novel. It's 1,000 pages. It's a mammoth, but doesn't quite look like a mammoth. And the interesting thing is when I looked up this book on Amazon after to see what a hardcover of this would go for, which I like to do with some of my thrift store finds, just to see what if I had to buy this online, what would I be paying versus what I actually ended up paying at the thrift store. And it turns out there's a new edition of this coming out, or a new translation of this book coming out this year by Tuttle Press, which is a press that publishes Asian classics. And I think it's the translator's name is like Anthony Bennett or something, but they're publishing the first part of the new translation this year. And I found that quite interesting, that a new translation of this book is finally coming out, because I believe this is the only translation in English at this point. And it's like a thrilling samurai type novel. That's what the dust jacket would surely be showing, is that rather distinct cover of a samurai or of a ninja or whatever you call them on the cover. And then we've got 3 more fiction hardcovers, and then we can get into the classics, and that'll be the end of the video. So this next 2 books are for sure on, or the last 2 books. So the next 2 hardcovers I show will be the last 2 books that were on those the world famous book reviewers' best of lists for fiction for each year. And the first book is by Sarah Waters' book, The Paying Guests, and it's a fairly handsome hardcover. And I don't know too much about the story, though. Yeah, it's more historical fiction. It's takes place in 1922, and it's about a family that takes in lodgers, and it creates like drama in post World War I in London in 1922. I don't know if I should be reading the descriptions of these to you. I always find it rather boring when other people do it, because I can just search up the book and read it myself. I don't need to watch a 50-minute video of someone spending half the time reading the Dust Jacket book. I'd rather have them just talk about why they picked the book up and, why it interests them and whatnot. But this is one of those books that I do remember from that list, and that I'm very glad to find an attractive hardcover. So yeah, there's a lot of historical fiction theme there, and I believe this next book is no different. It's Here I Am by Jonathan Safran Foer, and it's a lovely hardback, or lovely dust jacket, and it's a hardcover. Look at that. Just beautiful. And the thing is, when I saw this on the shelf, I had to do a double take because I have this book on my wish list, but the edition that's for sale now does not look anything like this. It looks it's darker. I think it's got like it's like a photo of someone's sneakers or something. But man, this hardcover is really lovely. And I can't actually say how much I know about this book, because just glancing at the dust jacket, it seems like it's like a Jewish themed novel, but that's really all I know. And but the book looks very interesting, and I love the covering of it, so very excited about that one. And then the last novel, or at least the last non-classic novel, is John Le Carré. This is an omnibus volume of 3 novels, and I got this for only the very first novel here. It's the Spy Who Came In From the Cold, which is one of his Le Carré's best known works, and it's one I've been looking for quite a while. And and I've only found it in this omnibus volume, so I have 3 of his novels now in this one volume. Though I've never actually heard of the other 2 novels, which are A Small Town in Germany and The Looking Glass War. I've never heard of those last 2. I don't know if they're any good, but the price I paid for this one volume, or for this omnibus volume, would have been no different than if I had found just a hardcover of the Spy Who Came In From the Cold. So I'll take the 3 novels in one, and if I end up liking that one book, then I can just move on to the next and see what I make of them. So yeah, and what is this? 20th Century Mystery and Espionage Library edition with a dagger on the side, and the back cover is just the same, a repeat. Yeah, that's my last novel. Then we move on to the classics. The classics should not take me a whole lot. I'm at 40 minutes. The first book, I guess you can consider a classic. I didn't really know where to consider it, because it's not fiction, it's not non-fiction, so I just put it on the classics. It's The Adventures of Tom Bombadil by J.R.R. Tolkien. And this is just a little anthology of all the lore of Tom Bombadil that J.R.R. Tolkien wrote about. If you are familiar with Tom Bombadil from The Lord of the Rings, he's one of the most controversial figures in The Lord of the Rings, because he really doesn't fit into the novel. And yet, J.R.R. Tolkien seems to have a lot of affection for him as a character. And the story goes is that he was a creation for his children. Like, he would tell stories of Tom Bombadil to his children. And inserted him into Lord of the Rings. And I guess this collects a lot of... oh, see, look, it's beautiful images here. It's a very small hardcover, so it's basically a mass market, but hardcover. And when you open the end papers, or the end here, lots of images. I think that's the same as that front. Am I right? Yeah, it's the same images, but and it's not illustrated. It's not illustrated. Says The Adventures of Tom Bombadil and Other Verses from the Red Book. So I really don't know my Lord of the Rings lore in order to really know what's all included in here. But yeah, it's very short. It's like 300 pages, and is it like a collection of short stories, or what is it? Drop the dust jacket here. I don't really know, but we'll see. We'll give it I'll give it a read through it at some point. I've read through The Lord of the Rings. I do need to reread that though. The Hobbit, of course, is one of my favorite novels. But I've never read The Silmarillion, so I'd like to read that at some point too. And then we have an anthology of poems. This is Story Poems, and it's an anthology of narrative verse selected and edited by Louis Untermeyer. And yeah, it's a little mass market of narrative poems. I gotta say, when it comes to poetry, narrative poems is the type of poem that I get along the best with. I think it's because there's a bit of a story there that I can grasp, and I don't have to worry so much about the dreamy, very elusive wordplay that and thinly layered, not thinly layered, but heavily veiled layered references that poems like to include, at least older poems. I'm thinking of older poetry here, not contemporary poems. Yeah, so what is all included in here? Yeah, Rudyard Kipling, Robert Browning, Longfellow, Lord Tennyson, Lord Byron, and then a whole bunch of names that I don't recognize. And it's got ballads. Yeah, it's broken up into sections, which is interesting. It's not layered by author. So instead of having a whole section on Kipling, it just includes all these different sections. So the first section is Brave Hearts and High Adventures. Second section is Ballads of Long Ago. Third section is just People. The next section is The Heart Speaks. And then we got Praise and Patriotism, Fable and Fantasy, Laughter in Rhyme, and Of Mystery and Terror. And then the last one is Heroes and Legends of the New World. So that sounds great. I'm totally looking forward to this. If anything, this might be a poetry anthology that I can actually get through from front to back. So let's hope for the best with that. The next is actually a novel, but it's a classic novel because it's published in Penguin Classics. And it's A Grain of Wheat by a African author whose name I cannot pronounce. It would be worse than having me try to pronounce some of these other authors here. And so I'm not even going to try, and I'm not going to butcher that person's name. All I know is that that person, he was a great Kenyan author, and a number of his works are published in Penguin Classics, and I've had my eye on them for a while, as books I do want to get someday, but finding this one at a used thrift store was really good find, and it's perfectly usable floppy Penguin edition, so I'm very pleased with that. Though I find it very interesting, because the back title says here, or the back blurb here says, the best known novel by the great Kenyan writer, and it's got a preface here, or a little message here by Chinua Achebe, who is, if you're familiar, is the author of Things Fall Apart, which is a Nigerian author and work. But none of these works are published in any kind of other language than English. So it seems like they're using English as their writing language, is what this introduction says. There's no translator for this. They're just writing in English, so it seems kind of interesting to me, or very kind of odd to me that it's called like a great Kenyan work if it's not written in its original, or the author's original language, unless English is their original language and it's just product of the colonial forces. But I don't know, I'm very ignorant on African history. We got 3 more Penguin Classics here. We got Cicero. This is selected political speeches. I'm hoping to read Cicero when I get to the Romans in my Western Canon reading list, and so this will be a perfect insertion there. And this is translated with an introduction by Michael Grant. Yeah, just a slim volume. I wish there was a big fat one volume of like the selected works of Cicero, because he wrote a lot, and a lot of it is translated in Penguin and Oxford, but they don't make a big anthology volume of his works, because he wrote a lot, and a lot of it survives, but not all of it is worth reading, but a lot of it is, and because he was considered one of the best Latin stylists of his time, so instead of getting like a whole shelf full of his works, I'd rather have just a one big volume work of his. This next volume is a Penguin Classic I've never heard of before, and I'll probably need someone else to, I don't know, give me some information about it. But it's the lives of the later Caesars, and the little blurb here says, the first part of the Augustan history, which is italicized, with newly compiled lives of Nerva and Trajan. And I'm certain this is playing off of the lives of the 12 Caesars by Suetonius, but I don't really know what these sources are. And it says, translated with an introduction by Anthony Burleigh. It says, anonymous writer pretending to be a team of 6 much earlier biographers, written in the late 4th century. It's just, so it seems to be playing off of the 12 Caesars of Suetonius. Let's see, in this fine modern translation of its only true sequel, Anthony Burleigh has also bridged the gap by providing brief lives of Nerva and Trajan. Together they provide a unique portrait gallery of the colorful and compelling personalities who ruled most of the known world during the great period of Roman history. So did the translator add his own prose works to this? That seems rather arrogant to put into a Penguin Classic, but we'll see how that goes. It's fairly short, so I could read through that and give it a try. This next volume is The Lives of the Artists by Vasari, and it's volume 2. I don't have volume 1, but I figured finding volume 2 there, one day I'll find volume 1, and volume 1 will be, hopefully will be the easier one to find, so that if I just find volume 1 all by itself, then I can just pick that up and have it go together with my volume 2. But I believe that the 2 volumes that Penguin publishes of Vasari's Lives are not even the entire thing. The entire thing is a lot bigger than that, but includes a lot of forgotten names or names that aren't considered important these days, and therefore people treat it like Plutarch's Lives, where they just kind of edit out the less interesting names and only keep and publish the more famous names, and all to the exclusion of the idea that this is an entire work done by the author with unifying themes throughout, that it isn't a work where you can just take patches out and assume that that's like representative of the entire work. But this is what the most modern translation this work has ever had, so might as well. And who is the translator? George Bull. George Bull. He did their edition of Machiavelli too, or Machiavelli's The Prince, I should say. Then we come to two novels, and then 2 works of mythology left. So we're almost done Booktube. Hopefully my peacekeeping efforts hold Booktube at bay before the entire platform explodes. But here we are. We're at the finish line is near. This is a naked hardcover, another naked hardcover. This is George Eliot's Adam Bede in the Everyman's Library edition. And because I love these editions so much, even as naked hardcovers, the fact that this didn't come with a dust jacket is not a problem at all for me. And usually I would just consider reading this as an ebook, but I just love these Everyman Library classics so much that I'm perfectly willing to spend like $3 on a hardcover for the work. So that's Adam Bede by George Eliot, the great Victorian writer. Next is got to be the find for the classics, other than the Kenyan author who wrote A Grain of Wheat. That would be one find, a major find, but that would compete head-to-head with this one. This is Master and Margarita by Bulgakov, and this is a new translation, or at least new in terms of when this was published. I believe this was published in 2008. Translated by Hugh Alpin. Yeah, 2008, and this is the Elma Classics line, where they have very distinct designs like this, where they're kind of boxy with like cartoonish designs on the front, but they're well known to publish new translations of Russian works. So their Crime and Punishment and their their Tolstoy volumes, their Chekhov volumes, they're all new translations of these works in these attractive little paperbacks. And those are some of the other Bulgakov editions that they publish. So lesser known Russian works, but also well known Russian works like this, but in new translations. So I find them quite invaluable. This is the 3rd translation that I have. I have the Pivar and Volkonsky translation, which is the one that everyone seems to know about, because it's published in Penguin Classics. But then there's the, I don't know the translator's name, but there's the original translation from the 60s or something, whenever this book came out. I have that in a paperback, and now I have this modern translation. So I have 3 translations of a work I have not actually read yet. So I can test the waters and see which translation I'll start with, and then just go from there as I learn the work. And then we have the 2 books on mythology that I promised. This is Gods and Heroes by Gustav Schwab, and the subtitle is Myths and Epics of Ancient Greece, and it's a big, oversized thing. I did pass on some other works of mythology, but this one I didn't want to pass up on, because This one seemed the most comprehensive, and it's also the most attractive one. The other one seemed more based on simplicity or just dumbing them down. This one seems to let the mythology breathe in its open space. So it's over 1,000. No, not. It's over 700 pages. Sorry, and it lets them breathe in their length. While there was another mythology volume in a hardcover that was very much going for brevity in their stories. So this one I thought would be a worthy addition to my library, and I left that other one behind. And then we had come to a classic book on mythology. This is Bullfinch's Mythology, the last book in my book haul. It includes The Age of Fable, The Age of Chivalry, and The Legends of Charlemagne. And this is an illustrated hardcover. It says illustrated edition, and it's just an attractive hardcover of Bullfinch's Mythology from the Victorian period. It says it's illustrated, but I actually haven't looked inside it to see what the illustrations are like. But here's a map. Let's see if we can get some more illustrations here. There's a full page one there. Oh, there's another one. There we go. Very nice. I'm very glad that, if you recall, in one of my other book hauls, I got a similar edition to this, a hardcover illustrated The Golden Bow by, was it Fraser? Which is like a Victorian classic of anthropology, of religion and whatnot. And this seems to be in that similar vein, where it's a illustrated hardcover of a classic Victorian work. So Bullfinch's Mythology in a nice, beautiful hardcover. I consider it to be a great find. And there it is, Booktube. That's my enormous haul at almost an hour long. I hope that I've convinced Booktube that peace is better than war, and that at the end of the day, I am the winner. Thanks, Booktube.